Okay. I think, hello everyone. I think we're live. I think we're live. Hey everybody. Welcome to the 37th episode of the Lost and Found Bin. Pretty soon we'll be closing in on a year here with Chick and I, my co-host. And it's normally in wintertime I get kind of depressed, but for the past couple days I've been on this kind of road trip thing. So it's been kind of interesting moving around and stuff. So this week, how has it been going with you, Chick?
It's been going pretty good. I mean, there's been shifting. There's been activity on the Schumann resonance. It's got up to 40 hertz. There's like a lot of different things like that going on. I've definitely been feeling different phases of tiredness and soreness and all this kind of stuff. And interestingly enough, having that sync up with a lot of other people.
Mm,
So who knows where we'll end up kind of situation. These things keep changing, but that's basically I'm waiting to see what happens during the week or maybe the week after.
yeah, yeah. So definitely. So before the show, Chick and I were talking about just the truther community in general and the Mandela effect community and all that. And I got a interesting before the show from Michael Musco. He's in the chat room. He has his own channel. He's at Musco Music, all one word, Musco Music. And he works with Chick too as well. And I got a DM from him, and he and I were talking about different things, and I wanted to read off just a little bit about this DM here. He gave me permission to read off, and I just thought it would kind of set the tone for how we wanted to start the show. So he says, he goes, the biggest critique with the truth community or the fear based channels in general is the impending doom of the future. When looking at the past to align to the present instead, it feels much more like an opportunity for self improving cycles. I noticed a while ago as I was dropping I noticed a while ago as I was dropping fears. The fear trigger in the mind first, and then it would play out in the environment. At first, it felt like a punishment because I was repeating the same cycles over and over again. But what I've come to realize is that it was an opportunity to drop that fear by facing it and overcoming it. Once that button was no longer available for fear, it would stop and not happen again. It was like a building training exercise. I'm not sure if that is universal, but it is something I experienced. And as I've gone through this thing and the fears have been taken away, I started to fall back into the linear time by looking forward again. So I'm thankful for you and Chick helping me out to change the mindset again and snap out of that linear mode. And Chick, and thank you, Michael, for the incredibly kind words, and also too for illuminating something very important about Chick and I talk about it, but it's something that is worth really talking about over and over again, and that is the linear concept of time and how that promotes fear. And when that promotes fear, people take advantage of other people based off of that fear. And what we talk about is trying to re-examine the linear concept of time, which was created mostly as a thing to emphasize, um, you know, the economy, the individual economy of the person, and the broader economy itself. That's all time is for. There is no such thing as time. There is no such thing as the future. They invented the idea of the future so you would pay your mortgage, so you would pay your bills, so you would do all of those things to where it would sound insane, you know, to not think you'd ever get to the future. And as Chick and I have stated over and over again, and Michael knows as well, is that you will never ever get to the future. No one has ever gotten to the future. There is only now. Now, this isn't some kind of new agey mumbo jumbo. This is just a matter of statement. And what matters is you can still practice your faith, and you can still, do all of those things. But in fact, no matter what faith it is, you can enhance it by being able to experience it in a more full way, and you can indeed become more compassionate to people that are in pain in the present, and you can really see people when you're engulfed in the present, and it gives you like this special power. And that's why I think a lot of people are very suspicious of people that live in the present, because it gives you an extra power of empathy and compassion, because you know that if you go, "Hey, just," what you're doing is you're copping out when you tell someone, "Hey, man, just shake it off. You'll feel fine, tomorrow." What you're really saying is that I don't want to deal with it, so I'm going to throw out this fake thing tomorrow that hopefully you'll get there magically, and I don't have to deal with it right now. Because tomorrow will never get here. There's no such thing as tomorrow. And Michael, when he was talking about this new thing that they're talking about, the big toe theory with Tom Campbell, which is something that I'm interested in and I'm going to start looking into. And it talks about individual bubbles, and individual experience is based on individual bubbles. And it helps explain timelessness and all kinds of other cool stuff that I'm going to get into. But I just wanted to read that off because it really mattered to me. And we've had kind of a tough week here in the background. So it was kind of nice hearing that. And it helped me reemphasize the importance of being kind to people right now, because it matters and they matter, and people have feelings and they're human beings, and they're not bad people or demons or whatever it may be. The people around you who express that care for you, don't take that for granted right now. So anyway, sorry, Chuck. Anyway,
No, that was good. I enjoyed that. So I'm glad Michael Musko sent that into to us. It's
yeah,
awesome.
he is. He's pretty awesome. So anyway, linear concept of time, right? Kind of a bad thing. What's up with these fear-based channels, man? What is going on with that? And I don't just mean even just the Mandela effect community. I mean, what's up with that? I mean, is it just that they want to get clicks, or what do you think's going on there?
It could be. I think it's could be a mixture of a whole bunch of things. As in, obviously, if you are putting across a message uh, that gets people's attention, obviously you're going to get clicks or whatever. But kind of maybe nobody looks at what it's like year after year after year. I'm thinking about all of the like fearful videos that have been put out there like since 2012. And I remember so many different videos saying it, it's the end, it's all over, and just it's time to be afraid of everything. And at first people are very terrified, and then when it's year after year after year of stuff, then you can kind of shake it off and get more perspective. But I suppose there are some people that get kind of sucked into that, and
Yeah.
they feel like they're keeping themselves safe by keeping up to date with whatever is the latest, you know, threat or perceived threat or whatever it is that's keeping them afraid. And it's kind of it's a genre unto itself, I suppose.
Oh, think about, yeah, it's like a fear genre. And it's almost as if regardless of whether you're talking about the Mandela effect or you're talking about, the government in whatever sinister capacity, you're right. That fear, it is a genre. I don't want to talk about any specific YouTubers, particularly some of them that have gotten really, really big on it, but it's almost, you would think they would just some people would just stop listening to them, but they just keep getting bigger and bigger, and it's like every week it's something that is just awful, and a couple you and I've talked about in private, so it's kinda crazy.
That's true. There's some channels that are super huge, and um, I'm not sure, to what degree. I mean, it's good for people to be looking around and looking for information and all that kind of stuff, but I don't think it's good to be afraid all the time, you know, regardless of how pressing the issues and matters may be. You have to give your mind and your emotions a rest every now and then to maintain a balance. If you just scare yourself every single day over and over, that's almost like being addicted to adrenaline or something. Like it's not a good state to keep yourself in, and it may be more serious than we realize if it's such a big trend. As in, some channels are huge and they post every single day, and they have for years and years and years. And I'm like, what psychological effect does that have on people long term?
That's what I'm saying, and, for everybody out there who's ever confused, when Chick and I get on some of these subjects about like linear time or no future, or talking about the afterlife, or talking about life, or questioning certain things. I mean, I know for myself, and I don't speak for Chick, but for myself, when we get on these things, I don't do it to explore fear and to get you fearful. I do it because the entire point of my channel, and I think where I bond with Chick as well, when I first started listening to her work, and and we got together and proposed this thing, was that, you know, exploring these kinds of ideas is a positive outlet when you're an ME. And that way you can better understand your environment. And if you do it in a methodical, rational way, and if you're willing to say everything is on the table, but we'll look at it and we'll study it, then you're able to sort of mentally handle it if you do it one at a time. So, I know for me, and I think Chick feels the same. When we talk about these things, we're not here to rev people up. We're not here to hurt you. We're not here to make your day bad or anything. And I get a lot of negative comments, and I've got one particular video that's taking off right now. And, the video was meant to be an extension of the exercises that Chick and I engage in, of exploring what this is, because the premise here is Emmy is real. Chick and I go through it, and it's real for us. So we go, okay, this is real. It's in the environment. So that means there's something in the environment that we don't understand. So the entire point of the Lost and Found bin, and the broader point of my channel, and I think hers, is to understand what is this thing. And in order to do that, you've got to question everything, So that's how I feel about it.
For sure. And I just don't see why that would be such a bad thing. And I've met resistance in the past, just like on my own channel and stuff, for just exploring ideas. And I'm just like, I don't see why it would be wrong, especially when the Mandela effect, as a widely known thing, is a new concept, at least within our lifetimes. It may have been widely known, in the past and everything like that, but in our lifetimes, it wasn't something that was spoken about or known, whether it was happening or not as a phenomena up until recently. So it's not as if it could be treading on anybody's toes culturally, morally, whatever it is. At least it doesn't equate that way to me.
Mm,
And I've always been like, I just want to explore ideas. I'm not trying to upset anybody. I'm not trying to do something wrong by exploring ideas. And I honestly don't see what damage I could do by exploring possibilities about the Mandela effect. And I put that to people. I say, this is what I think. I'm not saying to people, this is what it is, and I got the settled science or anything like that. Like, it's not like that. I tell people, this is what I strongly believe, this is what I've observed, everything like that. But and then try to draw my conclusions from there. But yeah, even though it's been 2 years or so now, my channel, there's still sometimes a question of, some kind of morality that goes with exploring the effect. And usually it's tied to other people get upset if you're exploring the effect deeper, because they're upset with just the base level of the effect, with just seeing Mandela effects. And then if you go further, then they become even more upset, or they
yeah.
feel unsafe because they don't understand the Mandela effect or something like that. And I'm like, okay, but this is not to attack anybody. And in all honesty, covering your eyes and hoping it's not there has never been a good strategy if you're afraid of something. It's
Yeah.
much better to investigate it to whatever degree you can, try and examine every part of it you can and measure it out and see what kind of sense you can make of it. Because if it's a big unknown, it'd be far scarier than something that's half known, at least. So yeah, I'm just on a different page, I guess, with my logic and my coming to terms with the effect. And I don't think that I should stop, like, looking at different possibilities with the effect just because other people are like panicking or in panic mode or something.
Mhm.
Uh,
And, if the effect if you go to the point to where you're where Chick and I are at, and I think pretty much everyone in the chat and the regulars I'm seeing here, we're already at that base level where we know it's real. Okay, so we've moved on from that. I think a lot of people in this chat are very brave, so we've moved on from that. We're all very brave. Then you can begin to bravely make these questions and do it from a place of general curiosity and bravery, and not a tool to try to control people or to threaten them or to attack them with either some kind of um, uh, spiritual or faith driven threat, or to say that you're breaking some kind of dogma regardless of what the spiritual context is, because the Mandela effect, indeed, it does have a lot to do with the spiritual world, so naturally you have to engage that, and the fact that it's changing a lot of things for people, okay, changing a lot of things that was settled dogma spiritually for a lot of people. That means that, you know, a lot of people that have big channels, they move in, I feel, and they see that in there, that someone thought that there was settled dogma in terms of their spiritual afterlife philosophy, and they want to somehow profit from it, whether it's clicks, whether it's feeding off the fear, whether it's just being a provocateur or any of those things. And I think it's a real shame that a lot of channels, that's what they live for, that's what they live on. And whether they profit from it emotionally or financially, I think it's a shame. And I just want everyone to know that the work that Chick and I do, you know, by bringing up things like the Philadelphia experiment, we talk about the things we talk about, we're able to get this kind of cool feedback like Michael gave us about, you know, people having a real life way of this linguistic empire that we're building of ourselves, like with the linear time, and being able to take comfort in the past and do things with the past and do things by removing yourself from this linear concept of time that people were unable to do in order to alleviate anxiety or fear or something else. So to me, that's progress. We're making progress then. Even if you think we're delusional, it, as long as we're alleviating a person's anxiety and we're making their life better, I don't care what you call that, okay? A placebo still matters if that person is cured. Then so even if we're giving the placebo effect, I don't care. I mean, how are you feel about that, Chick?
I just like I said before, I just don't see like that much of a thing about why you can't look into this. And again, I think it comes down to fear. And like you said there, if looking into it does help alleviate some fear and does help shed some light, then why not look into it? For me, it just seems very straightforward.
I mean, and look at it this way. Look at the new lens we all have on life. Like for me, I always go back to the Anatoly Fomenko. I would have read his book without ME, and I would have been like, wow, history is changing and it's not what he thought it was. And oh my gosh. But with ME, I'm able to go, yeah, it's easy to see his frustration is because the Mandela effect is changing time. It's quite easy to see that. And yes, that's what's happening. And you almost get a leg up on everybody else when you start like us. We understand the world works differently than the most 99% of the rest of the population, and rather than cowering and running off and saying, quaint or trite phrases that I hear over and over again. We've been blessed with this opportunity to explore and use this equipment, like these lenses, I call them, to explore reality. And we owe it to the rest of the world to exploit this to its fullest potential. And I think that's what we all do here.
I think so too, and I think that it's. I'm just trying to find the right words here. It's
We got to dance around this, don't we? It's funny, isn't it?
it is. But I think the people are good friends here in the comments section. They totally get it. They understand, like, what this is about, and they understand that people deal with fears and unknowns and things in different ways. And sometimes that comes from your life experience, and sometimes it just comes from your personality, or whatever it is. Nature versus nurture on that one. And we can see that in the Mandela effect community. So if there are channels that react to it more like you do and you resonate more with them, that's perfect. There's so many different people taking different approaches to this, that you're very likely to find at least a few channels that you really click with, and you're like, yes, this is like how I would deal with it, and I'm feeling this and I like this. I don't think that it should be all just one way, and that it should be like almost like some people are waiting for an authority figure to come and announce what it is, and they don't need to look into it further or anything like that. And I'm just like, why? We can see it ourselves. What do we need somebody with a big title or a PhD or whatever? We don't need them. Use your own eyes.
Yeah,
You're
that's
so
well
trained to
said.
accept what the authority figures are telling you, that they could be telling you something opposite from what you're seeing with your own eyes, and you'd believe them. Not the people obviously here listening to this, but I'm just saying in a more general way in the population. And I think we're outside of that. In all honesty, in the Mandela effect community, we're outside of that. We need to get out of that old way of thinking, because a lot of the experts and the big important people, they're not awake. They're not here. So obviously we don't need them. We can do this ourselves. And not to say that there aren't white papers written that are very extensive, or that there isn't an expert class working on this, but I'm just saying, as far as we go with as the community, there's no reason why we can't explore this phenomena ourselves and not come across some very interesting aspects and ideas, or even just theories about it. I don't think we need to wait for permission from someone.
Yes. And that's just it. We have the audacity, which offends a lot of people. You and I have the audacity. The people in this chat have the audacity to take the reins in our lives into our own hands. And we're not looking for a hero or some kind of, um, super person to save us. We're saving ourselves and we're doing it ourselves. And I think that offends a lot of people. I think that um, by us calling into question, someone mentioned in the chat the settled science idea, which is very funny because we've all brought this up. There is no such thing as this. There is no settled anything. You look at a book 50 years ago, 100 years ago, nothing has ever changed. And it's that language they use that they constantly keep using and changing to create the constant placebo of a society around you, and so you can feel protected when you're really not. And that we have that audacity to question those things, and I think that really is offensive to a lot of people. They expect to be obedient, and they see us as being disobedient, and I think they expect to say, okay, we've been given permission about the Mandela effect to point out MEs that exist, but we can't go any further with it. And the reason why we can't go any further with it is because, and somehow, in some way, like you said, people with the right titles, people with the right degrees haven't stated anything official other than that we've all had that mass delusion. But like we've said before, and we'll say it again for anybody who's new, in order for the Mandela effect to be what they claim it is, the people who have the authority, who have the proper credentials, you would have to, on your own, all have the same mass delusion, not talk to one another about it for 20 or 30 years, like the Ed McMahon thing and the stupid check thing, or a movie line. and you all had it on your own. You all came up with it all by yourselves. And then finally, when the Mandela effect broke, you all knew the same, you imagined the same delusion the same way. Like no one ever goes, "Hey, I remember him not delivering a check. I remember him delivering a sheep." Or remember him delivering a pony. No, everyone remembers the same thing. Ed McMahon delivering the stupid check. He never came with a pony. He never came with a cannon that would shoot glitter. You remember the same delusion then. That is stupid. That's ridiculous. But then again, this is the same scientific community that tells us the most absurd, ridiculous, impossible things. And yet, because we've surrendered our autonomy, so many other times, it becomes offensive when you finally say enough with the Mandela effect. And I think that really offends people because the people who are shined upon on this society the most are the most obedient. We are in a competition in the society to be the most obedient. And it's no coincidence. Everything around you that's been created in this world to show you what is good or what is bad is based on how obedient you're going to be. And that includes the linear concept of time. How obedient are you going to be about the future? And just by questioning those things, we are showing that kind of audacity. And the only thing I will personally apologize for was my original 2012 series was that approach of saying rather than questioning is what like Chick and I our approach is now. I was saying it with authority, and I shouldn't have said that with authority, which I've already apologized for, but just bringing that up again. That's something that I had learned on the way because I had become so enraged and I had become so disobedient that I was already at a point where I was ready to be disobedient all the way and claim authority, which I don't have. So I've reined that back in. And since this show, I've never displayed that kind of language with Chick and I or with anyone else in this audience. But yeah, definitely, we are in a weird way heretics to something that's supposed to be a delusion anyway. Does that feel strange to you, Chick?
Yes, it definitely does because I suppose, in many ways, people may see the Mandela effect as something that is very close to their faith, like the people thinking perhaps it's the rapture or perhaps it's, revelations, and it could be. But even so, why is it wrong to look into it and see what's going on? And I think that that does also, it comes down to fear, and it comes down to what you just said there about your value, your direct market value in this system is completely tied with your obedience and how much you're willing to pay and pay and pay. If you sign up, for that 30 or 40-year mortgage and you're a good debtor, then you're a great person.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically our society. And I'm sorry for it to sound so bleak, but
Mm-hmm.
people never say that, and then they say, why is my life so depressing? Like, why is it just cycles of the same thing over and over and over? And I said, because this thing, like, the more I look at it, I've seen the poverty cycles up close, first at hand. And I just thought, oh, well, the rich people, they have better lives. It must be better over that side. And then you look over at, because, the pasture's always greener on the other side. You look over there and they're having a terrible time too. They get taxed. There's all this drama. Their families, everyone just wants their money, and they have all these different cycles that they're stuck up, or rather stuck in. And it just looks like nobody is free, except maybe the person that has no money at all, which surprised me. But that's one of the things that I seem to come across in life was like the people who are most detached from the system have the most freedom, and the people who are most involved with it have all of these responsibilities, duties, things that they have to do, and we're talking very, very long term, that you're just kind of tied into. If you have any measure of success or the American dream or anything like that, you're tied into a lifetime of paying for things that you own, or thinking you own things that you actually just lease, or all this kind of ridiculous stuff, and people are genuinely, they're not happy, but they're willing to do it because we've discussed many times before, if you don't pay your debts, then you're a bum and you're not seen as a good person in society. And if you never get into any debts at all and you never take part in society, then you're just completely on the fringes. And then people really don't know what to say to you. But
Absolutely.
this
And the
system is
worst
like that.
part is that, there are, channels or entire sets of channels that use that obedience and reinforce it by, it's kind of a real kind of low life, and it's a very easy way to ensure that, you force that system and make it something incredibly ugly, and that any kind of questioning or any kind of us pondering like we do is tantamount to some kind of blasphemy. I oftentimes I get the comment. And I also want everyone to know that if you're part of another group, you're an ambassador of that group. And you have to take responsibility for that, especially if you proclaim it. You are. And for everything that you do and everything that you say, whether you like it or not, you represent that group, particularly on YouTube. And whether or not it's I don't know, whether it's the ME community or whatever it may be, and you go to someone else's channel or you go to someone else's Twitter feed or something like that, you can either help or you can damage that individual cause. And you can either add or you can take away from that. But if you go and you're negative about people, and then you are a representative of a particular group, and I don't know, I'm not going to pick any, like let's say um I don't wanna pick any group because I don't wanna pick on anybody, but if you're part of a particular group and you're negative and you're mean-spirited, and particularly some of the tenets of that particular group is the complete opposite of that, um, and then you don't understand why the broader community picks on you, you need to recheck the way in which you engage other people. And you really need to think about that, how you do those things. A lot of people need very much to have a little bit of self introspection. And I hope people in the ME community, especially those in this chat and regulars in this chat, understand that you are an ambassador. And when you talk to people about the Mandela effect, or if you talk to people about your spiritual life, you're an ambassador of your spiritual life. You're an ambassador of your internal life. And you're also an ambassador, and you affect everyone else around you that proclaims that same kind of internal life or spiritual life. And that don't don't be negative, and then whenever you hear in the broader community people being negative about whatever spiritual cause that you adhere to or internal moral system that you adhere to, don't be shocked when people are negative, or they don't trust it, and you're exhibit A for the reason why. Because you've got to remember, if you have a spiritual belief system, okay, you don't own that system. That system existed before you did. Your interpretation of that system is just that. That is your interpretation of that system. That is not you owning that system. And it can easily be hijacked by 5, 10, 15, 20 people in a sewing circle. And then they go out and others think that's the representation, especially if they're not familiar with that spiritual system or that internal way in which you conduct your life. And then eventually it spreads. And then you have this self-fulfilling prophecy of people are suddenly negative to you and your spiritual system because all they've seen from it is something incredibly to put it bluntly, garish and mean-spirited and hateful. So remember that you are an ambassador to probably, and think about every kind of slot that you fit into, particularly now that we are MEs and we are on that if you are going to proclaim ME, if you are going to represent yourself to the broader world, you've got to understand that the rest of us in some side way some small way, you're representing us as well. Because if you say you're an ME, or you say you adhere to a particular spiritual system, and then you act like a jerk, the next person like me that comes along, it's going to be 10 times harder for me to convince that person that, yes, the ME you're experiencing, we're not all that way. We're not all bad MEs. So, sorry, I got on a tangent again.
I think that, we are Mandela affected, and it's like you said there, it's a situation of understanding that perhaps the broader world, and I don't know if the broader world even is looking into our channels and what we do, or if they have interest in that, but we don't want them to just see just chaos and fear and hatred and whatever wild emotions are flying around because people are afraid of the Mandela effect, which
Yep.
I'm coming back, I think that's the baseline of what so much drama in the Mandela effect is actually about, is people are afraid of the Mandela effect. They can't resolve their feelings, they have to lash out at somebody, and it happens to, it turns into like stupid dramas over nothing. And you've seen this in all kinds of different Mandela effect channels, and bigger channels, smaller channels. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, I'm talking about the community at large. And I just think that it's a real shame, and in all honesty, for people who are just starting to wake up, if they think that fear is the number one factor with the Mandela effect, they're not going to want to pursue it further. I think that first impressions are very important. For me, when I first wanted to understand the term Mandela effect, I found it really difficult to find a video that would just, in simple terms, just explain to me what the term is. Because a lot of people were already going into deep explanations. And that's like what I wanted when I first heard the words, even though I had been Mandela affected years before the phenomenon was given a name. So, when people thought it was just a bandwagon thing and they said, oh, this woman came up with this thing, Mandela effect, and now everybody believes in it, at least I was able to say, well, I have life experience to the contrary. I had the experience first, and the terminology all came later. But for somebody that's maybe just waking up now, like they're Mandela affected, I want us to be good ambassadors as best as we can for whatever channel they gravitate towards. It doesn't have to be, towards one channel over another kind of thing. But I'm just saying, as people wake and as they come to realizations with this, they're not going to want loads of drama, loads of crazy stuff like reality TV. They're going to want clear and precise descriptions or observations. They're going to want things kind of simply broken down, after stage one, where you look at literal Mandela effect videos where it's like, this has changed and that has changed and this has changed. Then it's good for them to start looking at terminology as to what they believe. Like, is it different timelines? Is it different realities? Is it just all in your own consciousness? And, and then they can branch off from there on what resonates most with them. And I think that actually branches into a point that you've made several times, is that we don't have direct access. If there are people going around, like you said, on speedboats, and they know the truth and they have direct access and they don't have to reinvent the wheel like we are, then of course there's far less margin for error. But since we aren't given any particular special access, we're not the important appointed people in this crazy system to even be allowed to see this or discuss it or anything else. I think we need to cut ourselves some slack on that regard, but we also need to be extra put together as ambassadors, because we are doing this very DIY, very reinvent the wheel, and we don't want it to look like a crazy mess. We want it to have cohesion to some degree, even though it's branching off into so many different possibilities, so that people can take us seriously, and see that it's not just disobedience for the sake of disobedience. It's literally trying to survive in the reality that you're in now, and in a situation where you can't control it. The best control you can have over it is to have a broader understanding of it.
Absolutely. Well, very, 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 very well said. And it's such a shame that we have to I guess it's important, that we're doing this episode this way. I thought it was just gonna be disappointing because I thought it was a waste of an episode. Like, I'm seeing, someone, Rosanna here talking about, the feelings that her father had in the top chat in here, in the chat, and that could have been, an entire episode dealing with the feelings and particular feelings about when someone is just now sort of onboarding into ME, and you have a loved one is becoming awake to it. That's something we could have been discussing now. However, I considered this something that was a bit of I wouldn't say it annoyed me, but I would say that this episode started off with because of some background, stuff that it was something a bit of a waste of an episode. But I think what you and I, the way we've expressed things and the way that people are reacting in the chat, that this is turning into something very positive and very good. And I'm very happy actually, and it turned out to be a very good thing. And Rosanna, I'll write down that is as a show thing in the future, because it is important. Not this show, but another one. When you're already emmied, you're already in it. You're in it with us, and you understand it's real. It's incredibly real, and someone around you is waking up. You know how we don't have that book, that authority. We've taken it upon ourselves, like Chick said, because we're not the ones in the speedboats. We're not the ones at the top of in the penthouses at the top of the very tall skyscrapers with the helicopters landing where they don't even have to deal with traffic. We're not those people. So we have to sort of write this thing ourselves, and we have to create this manual ourselves. So an important thing would be how to deal with loved ones, particularly if they're in a fragile state, an older person or someone who may be set in their ways to deal with ME, when you're already there. And that's something we often talk about and deal with. Chick, I've just realized people who will never believe it or see it or care about it. But what about those, that end up coming around, and we have the ability to actually um, help, because we are MEs, and if we have a loved one, a parent or a grandparent or a child or whatever it may be, and we're well beyond those initial stages you brought up, and we're in the deep end of the pool. I consider us the deep end of the pool, and um, you're here with us. What that's going to be a would be a great show. You know, and that would be a or a 180 from what we talk about normally, which is people dealing with people who ignore it and ignore us and all of that. But that will be something, I mean, I think would be worth talking about, is someone who actually does come around, because it does happen. And we don't talk about that very often, because normally 99% of the time is people don't come around. What happens is someone who becomes an ME is they wake up, they have this spiritual experience with an NDE or something like that, or just some other spiritual experience, some kind of awakening, some kind of earth shattering thing. They become an ME, and then they go through the the levels, like Chick was talking about, finding the changes and all this, and then eventually you come to a channel like this. You come to us, and you end up here with us, who has and that's where we can talk and talk frankly about ideas versus, yes, we know things are changing. That's we got that's done. So what do you think about that? That's a pretty good topic. Someone who's actually positive towards it and kind of onboarding them.
For sure. And it does happen. Like, it's not as common, but it does happen for sure. And it's interesting, when people finally they do come around and they are like a tiny bit more comfortable with it, just what their ideas about it are. Like the people that were skeptical or timid about embracing it at first or jumping full into it like we did. I've had that experience recently where someone was very apprehensive about the whole thing and didn't want it whatsoever. And then had a full on discussion with me the other day. And I think that there's still a lot of emotion tied to it because when he talks about it for any length of time, he starts getting headaches. Like it actually
Mm,
affects his physical body to talk
mm,
about it for too long. But he did talk about it and he had all kinds of ideas of his own of what it might be and what might be going on and what's up with base reality and why there were why there's a reality with 9 billion people but here it's only 7.6 billion and these different things and it's a very different take on it than I had, so I was very interested to hear. I
oh,
think it's
has the number jumped again?
it probably has. There's been so much shifting, like let me just check right now. Earth
Gosh, it's
population,
like almost daily at this point.
it jumps like 7.6, 7.2, 7.6, 7.2 a lot recently.
Yeah.
7.6 today.
Okay. 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 Well, I remember when people made a really big deal at 6 billion.
Yes. And then a lot of people told me that for them it's always been 6 billion and they were surprised it went up to like 7.6 or 7.2. And I was like, 7.6, 7.2? There's like 2 billion people missing. Like, this is crazy. You know? Like, for
Hmm.
me, I'm just like, no, it should be 9 billion. There was 2.1 billion people in China, and now there's 1.2 billion people in China. Like, half the Chinese are missing. Like, this is some
Right.
crazy stuff, but then half the landmass is also missing. So who even
Well,
knows what's going on with that?
and that goes back to just as a quick sidebar that I remember when India was considered a subcontinent, when it was and it was as big as a continent, and now it's nowhere near that size. And I know that's kind of a far flung, sidebar, but I remember that. I remember was when, India was enormous and it was called the subcontinent. And now on this and now that we're away from Sagittarius, it's not. I mean, it is for MEs. And again, that goes back to people who aren't ME or who are MEs, but they haven't had the awakening yet. And there's nothing you can do to waken them up. But that's something we've gone over. Um, you know, yeah, like, 5 billion. I remember it was a big deal when it was 5 billion, 6 billion. And then I remember for a small period of time when we must have shifted for a very short period of time, I remember 12 billion for a very short period of time. It was 12. And I remember the world was very tense and anxious. And then when we shifted to 9, I almost instinctually checked Google to find out what the population was, and I could almost sense there were less souls around me in this realm. And sure enough, it was 9, and we had dropped. So I still do things like that. I just don't as much anymore. Now I try to ponder ideas and things like that. But I still do quite a bit of dealing with facts and things like that. Definitely, absolutely. But I think definitely, the theme here has turned into something that is very positive. That you are an ambassador, especially if you're then deep in the pool like we all are here, and that you owe it to us and you owe it to yourself the responsibility of understanding whatever group you belong to, particularly if you're in the truther community and you're in sort of one of the misfit communities like the Mandela community. You are an ambassador, and that responsibility, particularly if you're an advanced ME, that you represent all of us, and that when someone wakes up, they shouldn't see. It's a shame that the good thing is the first level they get to are the changes in logos and things like that, because those channels are usually the bigger channels, and those are pretty okay. And then there's the mid level where things start getting dicey, and I wish that we could all come together and be more understanding of this, because if you truly believe this, and I think we all do, if you truly believe that this is very real and that reality doesn't work the way we thought it does, then then and this to be true, then you must understand that you have that responsibility that's been bestowed onto you, whether you think it a curse or a blessing, and that you owe it to all of us, every one of us, to be as helpful as you can to the rest of us. And I don't ask much from anyone here other than clicks and your attention. But please be mindful of that. And it would, particularly for Chick and I, because we get the brunt of sometimes some things that we don't always talk about. So
Yes, and just on the population point here, Dark Slayer brings up a good point. Reminds me that every single population that I've seen, doesn't matter how big or how small it is, Earth population, the controllers still say we need to depopulate, we need less people.
I know.
It's the thing. It doesn't seem to matter if it's 6 billion people or 9 billion people. They're still like, oh, it's too many people. Oh, it can't be managed. Oh, it's too many people. We need to get rid of all the people. I don't know why that's such a common theme. That's yeah. I don't like the idea of kind of us being disposable just because we're not. The whatever it is, the class that has access to all these truths or whatever. And in all honesty, I don't really have that much, you know, looking up to them, because I feel like in a lot of cases, the truth is given to them. It's passed from one person to another. It's not that they have to reinvent the wheel and be smart enough to come up with all of this, come up with everything to surround a phenomena themselves from the ground up. I don't think they could do it if they traded places with us. They would probably just be, the people that didn't see it because nobody told them, or they'd see it but they haven't come up with anything that incredible on their own stead as to what it is and what it could be. And I think that sometimes you need to give yourself a little bit more credit when you do have a really good community that is very, very much just coming together by itself in an organic fashion. It's not something that's funded by billions of dollars. It's not something that, is, we're given all the secrets to the universe and it's just ours to play with or something like that. It's nothing like that. It's people that are supposed to be just the usual good debtors who were allowed to see outside of the box temporarily, which is awesome. And
Yeah.
maybe that helps to. I think I had plenty of audacity before it happened, but I think it definitely helps to have more audacity after it happens, because it makes you reflect and say, well, perhaps there is a lot more to this, and perhaps valuing your life purely on a monetary scale is foolishness. Maybe that's not what it's all about, even though society says this and that in terms of importance. Maybe it's more about how adaptable you are and how much you can see and how much you can deal with.
And I think that's why this channel, is so subversive, and I think the show is incredibly subversive. It's probably one of the most subversive shows on YouTube, if only because we are absolutely in a very sophisticated way that can't be. You have to know so many meta levels of what you and I are talking about. And this chat room has to understand on so many meta ways of what we're talking about. We're hitting in a lot of ways every single sort of truth or trope out there or cliche out there with what you and I talk about and about the nature of reality. And in a lot of ways, the other channels that are truther channels, in a lot of ways, um, they're just we merely take those channels as aggregates. They aggregate up to what, you know, if I can toot our own horn, what we actually talk about. Because, a lot of channels get in trouble because of, let's say, mere, basic 101 politics and the back and forth of the 101 in politics, or the back and forth of 101 of monetary policy, or the back and forth of the history of banking, or whatever it is. You and I are actually talking about the linear time concept and the economy of morality, linear time, and how the Mandela effect could potentially, when you and and the rest of us in this chat get the key, we could unlock all of these things and free us from all of these things. And that, in a lot of ways, I think people who aren't smart enough, they know subconsciously that this is the ultimate form of disobedience, is to actually question the economy, which is actually the evilness of this world, the economic way that it's all tied together with your morality, and using shame and using obedience and using all of those things to make sure that you fear the future so you'll be a good citizen. I mean, we are in so many ways, and we've created such an eloquent way to question all of those things, and we do it through this thing, this Mandela effect thing, because it exposes all of those things. When the past changes and you never get to the future, what does that leave? It only leaves for you to do the exact opposite of what everyone does. And what Michael brought up, when you look towards the future, there's nothing but fear. So then what you can do is comfort yourself. Know that there is only the present, and that you can look in the past for what's going to happen in the present. And I can't think of anything more subversive than doing that. Than doing Think about, everything is time based. Everything. I mean, everything is time based, and we are turning that on its head. That is subversive in a 4D way, in a 5D way that people can't even begin to understand on most channels. I'm tooting our
That's
horn. I'm sorry.
well, it's true that it's kind of the bondage of time, the way that the society is set up, the way the debtor system is set up, the way that all of it is set up is horribly enough. And I've said this before in one of my videos on my channel. It's giving you enough currency to just complete a rotation. It's almost like they've turned your life into a circuit board. So you just get enough little currency to just make one little round, as in you can get to work, get home, and barely just to pay to have home. So you have somewhere to sleep to get to work, and work so you have money to keep your home, and that's it. That's your entire lot. And to take something as amazing as a human soul and turn it into a super simplistic, you know, microchip, to turn it into a circuit board like that is it's really, really bad. And I wonder if people waking up on all levels of society is perhaps some kind of inside answer to that, some kind of intuitive, self regulating aspect of the human consciousness, wherein we know that this is a complex system, and it's a harsh system. And people often say, "Oh, congratulations, you're retired," and stuff to people. And if they love their jobs, awesome. But I'm just saying, for people that had to go out and work for 40, 50, 60 years, who didn't enjoy it, who just had to do it because they had to do it, that's an incredible price to pay. It's like, oh, okay, you get maybe like 10 years when you're old to enjoy yourself, and then, you'll probably die, and that won't be fun, and, whatever. But congratulations that you worked for so long. Who knows what you got accomplished in your job in all that time? Maybe you were just shuffling paper back and forth or something. When you
Oh,
think about the amount of time that is, the amount of life force that is, the amount of your soul that you were born on this earth, and that's what you ended up doing, that's not okay. If you want to do that, if that's fulfilling for you, if that's what you feel you are here for, that's perfectly fine. But I'm just saying, if you know that that is not why you exist, in a larger sense of the word, then it is very difficult for you to kind of reconcile spending all of your life doing things you don't believe in.
well, and just look at it this way. When you've got a huge swath of the population that perhaps, which has now become more and more of a luxury to retire, they actually hope that they die before they run out of their money. You know how, I mean, how subtle the viciousness of that is, that we've created a system where you have to create commercials and financial vehicles to ensure that if you outlive your money, that, there's something extra you can pay for, which will make you work longer to ensure that you won't outlive your money, which is, a subtle way of saying that the money, and it is, the money is more valuable. In fact, you're a burden, and the money has the more value. And what, you can still be here, and if the money goes away, then you provide absolutely no value. The only value you had was the amount of money that you had, and if you're not working, then you have no value. And in fact, you're actually you're a net negative. And there, and the reason this system is created this way is exactly why ME is so dangerous, is because there are truths. This vertical thinking world, there are truths that you cannot have access to. The people, like I said, that are on the speedboats, that are on the top of the tall buildings, you don't have access to the truth. You don't. You do not. And if you do, then look at it this way. If you had access to the truth, okay, then you would be so dangerous that you would need to be enveloped in some way, willingly or not, by those other systems to where you couldn't let that truth out. And that oftentimes, I think, most systems that are designed, spiritual systems in particular, that are designed about the afterlife, are created so to ensure obedience in this thing that we call life. That's my personal feeling, and that's that's just something that I know is absolutely radical, but I do, and I think it's a lot of the systems that are out there, spiritual systems out there, they deal a lot with associating morality with money, morality with the monetary systems, and that a lot of systems associate morality with monetary systems, particularly Western systems. You cannot eliminate your morality and the parables and the stories without, their actual, that, in some instances, that morality is built deep into the fabric of spiritual systems, right? You're not thou shalt not steal. Well, I mean, that is inherently a capitalist idea, Not that I'm saying I'm a socialist, because 'cause I'm not, don't worry, I'm a raving capitalist, but I'm just trying to prove a point. That was the I was just doing an illustration there. Do not worry if anyone is, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist. I was just illustrating a point. And I'm totally, into capitalism. So, anyway.
I think that, and I suppose this is going to be something that's really controversial, but it's something I've spoken about before, and I think it's something that needs to be examined and looked at. A lot of our history, human history, there's been feudal systems, there's been systems with kings, there's been systems with reigning clans, there's been systems with tribes, there's been all these kind of um, governance systems, social structure systems, and we equate morality with the will of kings. And some people might say, well, there is no difference, because in scripture it says respect the laws of the land, and that I'm like, that's fine. But I feel like the point that needs to be made is that God loves you anyway, and he sees great value in you, and he does not just see you as the peasant that is not supposed to ever look above their station and anything like that. And it doesn't mean like in some rebellious way of breaking the laws and being a terrible person or something like that. It's just literally having value as a human being. And I think that there's so many, and I could just be ignorant about certain things, but I just think that when people say that it's morality and legalistic things are always on a par with each other, and that's just what's right is right kind of thing. It's like, I think that you should be conscious of both things. I think you should have an intuition to know in your heart and your soul and your mind what's right or what's wrong to do. You should have a conscience and say, oh, I'm not going to do that, that's wrong. And then on your more linear side of your mind, you should know, like, oh, these laws are written down and that's wrong. And you should be able to, and that's, I suppose, the thing that no king or ruler wants you to do, is be able to measure between the two hemispheres of your brain. Okay, this is legal, but is it moral? Or this is moral, but is it legal? And they
I
definitely
know.
don't want you looking at that. It's like, no, that always has to be the same. And I'm like, no, it's just there's so many situations that you could pull up through history and through everything else. Like one that's very popular is everything that Hitler did in Germany was legal in Germany at the time. But a lot of
Absolutely.
people would say it's not right. But I suppose
Yep.
that's one of the most dangerous ideas of all, because people will say, oh, well, that's spirit of rebellion and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I see such a difference between God, who loves us, and the controllers of this world who constantly tell us there's too many of you, we just wish you would die. I see a huge difference between those two things, and other people don't, and they just see authority as just kind of one thing. And like I said, morality and legality is the same thing, and maybe that's a simpler way to look at life. You don't have to measure things up so much. You don't have to have an individual consciousness to measure things up so much and say, on a spiritual level, do I agree with this or not? Not am I going to physically do something about it, or anything like that, but just literally inside your heart. What do you think about it? Because God made you conscious. He made you far more complicated than just your station. And if he's letting you see the Mandela effect, he's letting you see more truth, he's letting you see what's going on in this broader system, then why would you not take that up? Why would it be, God lets you see something and you think it's blasphemy to look into it further? That's just because you become so obsessed with the legalistic part of your consciousness that you think if you step outside the lines without permission of an authority figure, that must mean that you're the spirit of rebellion and that you're a bad person, because that's what you've been taught. And I'm just like, no, I think it's absolutely the opposite. I think if you are shown something, you're not trying to hurt anybody, you should pursue it. I think if you're given gifts, you should use them. They say that whatever gifts you're given, if you just waste them, that's a sin. And you might not see that as the same thing, but I think it's a gift to be able to see the Mandela effect just as much as if you have a beautiful singing voice, or you're an amazing concert pianist, or you're a painter, or whatever it is. Whatever you have been given, you should use, and you should grow upon it. It should expand. It should gain interest. Kind of going back to that parable about, did you make any money off the coins I gave you? And the person that just held on to the coins and didn't actually do anything with them was seen as the bad person in that parable. So I suppose it's like, you should try and do your best in these situations. It is difficult. I guess in my own case, it's like a little bit easier because for a long time, I've had situations where I'm not like a super duper rebellious person, but a lot of people that should have been authority figures and should have been, that kind of person in my life, a lot of times those people let me down. So I had to kind of do things for myself. So I don't see it as a violent or vicious or even that bad of a thing to do, to just try to take care of yourself and the people around you. I almost see it as like, if there is no authority figure that's able to do it, like there's nobody able to come forward and truly give us good representation about the Mandela effect, there's nothing wrong with us taking up that, taking on the baton, taking up that position until somebody might come in, and then maybe the wider world would listen because they're so obsessed with authority figures, because they're not going to listen to just normal people, no matter how compelling our cases may be. I honestly think if you try to present something to like this, and you start to talk about quantum physics, they say, well, you're not a scientist, you're not a professor of quantum physics, you don't have the degrees, you don't have the doctorates, you don't have this, you don't have that, because they don't understand the system they're in. They don't understand about why on earth would you put a black cube on your head when you graduate. The symbolism, what you're doing, you're
Yeah.
squaring the circle of your own head, like the putting the little tassel off to the left by so many degrees. It's, oh my gosh, that's a totally other road, but people don't even understand the system they're defending. So you have to cut them a lot of slack. because
Absolutely.
they don't see that. They're just told this is moral and legal, and therefore you have to defend it. And if you don't, then there's something really wrong with you.
That was awesome. And we are well over an hour because it was so awesome. And I just want to thank everybody. And please, please give us a thumbs up. My understanding is it helps out quite a bit with getting the word out. Hopefully, if you could be an ambassador, and if you know other advanced MEs, could you please tell them about our show? If you'd like to reach out to us individually, the best way for me is Twitter, and I'm at, let's see if it changed again. I don't know. It changes quite a bit. I'm starting to notice it now. I noticed it once, but I was okay. I'm still at AI underscore SM underscore SMQ on Twitter is the best way to get me. Chick, what's the best way that you'd like to be contacted?
Twitter is the quickest one. It's the one I check the most. So at Chick Effect on Twitter.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. So, that's it, guys. That's it for this week. We were a little bit late. I didn't know if I'd get home in time, so we're out of here. And, be a great ambassador and, make everybody proud. And until then, we will work on another cool episode. And everybody, thank you very much for showing up and have a great week.
Thank you, everyone.